Hello YouTube, my name is Pixie and I am part of the Angie system. Angie had posted a video about her dissociative identity disorder. I believe it was sometime last week. This is a follow-up video to that based on some of the questions that we have received due to that video. I did not appear in the first video just because of the fact that I wasn't sure how it was going to be accepted. Also, Angie had not taken much pride in her appearance in that video, so I wanted to go ahead and do this second video just as a follow-up to that one to answer some of the questions that we've received. For those of you just joining us, or for those of you who have not seen the first video, I will explain what dissociative identity disorder is. Basically what it is, it happens when the psyche is splintered due to a trauma of some sort. This could be natural disaster, kidnapping, abuse, you name it. Anything that is traumatic to that person would be enough to actually cause dissociative identity disorder. Normally this happens before the age of 9. Generally these traumas are life-threatening, long-lasting, or just very emotionally traumatic. So for example, while sexual abuse may not be life-threatening, it's very emotionally traumatic and physically traumatic in many cases as well. So that's what dissociative identity disorder is. Generally, it causes a split in personality. You can have as few as 2 personalities. You can have up to 100 personalities or more. In this case, we actually have 8 personalities. So I will go ahead and get started with the actual questions that we've received since the posting of the first video. So one question is, do the alters age? This is actually a pretty good question. It's a little bit hard to answer, unfortunately, because the answer is kind of yes and no. Cassie was created when the body was 2 years old. She is now 3 years old. However, the body is 29. So when I asked her about her age, she said that one day she just decided she wanted to be 3. You'd have to meet Cassie to understand her thinking on that. As mentioned in the first video, there are 3 alters inside of us that are under the age of 5. There is Cassie, as I've mentioned, who is 3. There is Pandora, who is 2 years old, and there is Candace, who is 9 months old. None of them have actually aged except for Cassie, who just decided one day she wanted to be 3 instead of 2. We don't quite understand her thinking on that, but we haven't really asked her too much about it. Some of the alters don't even have an age attached to them. Part of what actually creates dissociative identity disorder, though, is that parts of the psyche are stuck at a certain age. So the general answer to that question is no. The alters do not age. They usually do stay the same age. Is it similar to borderline personality disorder? So borderline personality disorder is one of the diagnoses that Angie has been dealing with for quite a while from professionals saying that that is what she has. So I will let you know here. I'll read off the symptoms of borderline personality disorder. Intense emotional and mood swings, or intense emotions and mood swings, I should say. Harmful impulsive behaviors such as substance abuse, binge eating, out of control spending, risky sexual behavior, reckless driving, relationship problems, low self-worth, a frantic fear of being left alone or abandoned, which may cause frantic attempts to hold on to those around you or to reject those before they can reject you, aggressive behavior, feeling empty inside, problems with anger such as violent temper tantrums, hurting yourself such as cutting or burning yourself, suicide attempts and suicidal thoughts, times when you feel paranoid or lose a sense of reality. So reading those symptoms, you can actually understand where that diagnosis is coming from in Angie's case. The important thing to realize about borderline personality disorder, though, is that you can actually have a personality within the dissociative identity disorder system who has borderline personality disorder while none of the others do. In Angie's case, though, she does not have borderline personality disorder. She is actually codependent. Which is a different illness entirely. So borderline personality disorder, it does have a lot of the similar symptoms, but it does not have that complete split in the personality. There are not different identities within that same person. It's more related to how you interact with the world as opposed to what has happened to your psyche. Many people who have borderline personality disorder, though, do share a similar background to those who have dissociative identity disorder of the severe abuse, neglect, trauma. So there are similarities, but there are a lot of differences. Can I develop more alters? It's possible. We haven't developed any more. The last one that came into existence was back in, we believe it was 2004. She's 19 years old. We haven't developed any more. It is possible that that could happen at some point. Somebody actually mentioned it as a form of wanting to see if they could actually create a personality. Technically, I guess it would be possible, but we would really prefer that not happen. How does it affect everyday life? So this is something that's a little bit harder to answer. Right now, Angie is actually seeking disability. The reason for this being because she's been having a lot of issues that are directly related to dissociative identity disorder. So, for example, for her food stamps, she actually had to volunteer at ARC thrift stores. While she was there, she had periods of feeling very confused about where she was, what she was supposed to be doing. She felt very disoriented. She felt very paranoid, as though somebody was watching her. So things like that affect her. Also, the other effects of everyday life is, as much as I hate to admit being a part of this, we actually do sit on her shoulder constantly and tell her about what's going on in her life. So basically, the way that it affects it, just imagine that you were walking throughout your life every day and you would have, 7 or 8 people standing behind you, just letting you know how they feel about what you're doing today. Some of you may feel that at work with your boss, but this would be slightly different, of course. It would be very frustrating. It feels, sometimes Angie does feel as though she doesn't have any privacy. For those of us who are alters, such as myself, sometimes it does feel like I'm not quite a human. Now, I do not identify as being a human, but it feels more like I am not necessarily a person. Um, it feels sometimes like people do not see me, and it's also very frustrating because when I come out into the body is not what I am on the inside. And for actually all of us, that is a problem. The little ones in particular, because they are children on the inside, they come out to the body and suddenly it's an adult body. So, for example, with Candace, it's very difficult for her because she comes into an adult body and forgets little things like we have teeth now, so sucking your thumb can be painful. So that's the way that it affects everyday life, both for Angie as well as for the rest of us. Is my case with dissociative identity disorder typical? No, and that's actually why I was not diagnosed sooner. Normally, those with dissociative identity disorder have blackouts, and those blackouts can last days. In Sybil's case, I believe she had a blackout that lasted for several years. So it can be a very scary thing and can be a very traumatic thing for those with dissociative identity disorder in the normal sense of the word. What we have is known as a moderate case of it. Angie typically knows what we are doing when we are doing it. We normally know what she is doing when she is doing it. However, we are still a danger to ourselves at times due to one personality in particular who is very suicidal and would like to end our existence. So our case is not actually typical. Does not mean that we have any less of a right to educate or any less knowledge on the subject. This is actually a question that was brought up because in my last video it was mentioned that there is 2 personalities in this system, myself and Angie, who are sexual, the others are not. This question is, would sex with an alter who does not enjoy sex make me sad? I'm guessing that would be traumatized or, cause negative impact. That's a hard question to answer. The reason being, it can have a few different effects. We have had a man once who, while Cassie was out, the 3-year-old, he was sexual with her. And she did not run into her internal garden here and send out one of the adults, which is what she should have done and what she normally would have done. So it was damaging to her. It still is something that she talks about as being a very traumatic experience. The other alters would actually not come out during sexual activity. The reason for that being they don't care. Candace wouldn't come out because it just doesn't interest her. Pandora won't come out for men. Cassie has come out. She would not do it again. And the others just don't have an interest. It's me and Angie mainly who have the interest. But yes, it can be very traumatic towards the alters if it were to happen to the alters who are not sexual. How does abuse continue to happen when there are protectors? This is actually a question that was posed to us before, and Angie was going to put it into her first video, but as I am the protector of the system, I wanted to be the one to actually put that out there, or to answer this question. So, protection can come in many different ways. If you think of a child who is being abused by mother or father, for example, or a child who is being sexually abused by a relative, if you think about that and think about where that child's mind is when this abuse is happening, they think that they're in the wrong, they think that they have done something bad to deserve this, or they think that that's all that they're good for. These are not emotions that a child is made to handle. So also since they're not able to handle this problem, or they're not able to handle these emotions, they also wouldn't be able to handle coming up with an appropriate response to it or an appropriate solution to it. So in my case, yes, I am a protector. Did I come out when Angie was being abused as a child? No. What I protected her from was the emotions that were caused by that abuse. I basically shielded her from that. And of course, as I gradually turned into a separate personality, it was easier for me to shield her, to hold those emotions for her. So this means that Angie is able to go through life relatively normally without being a nervous wreck. I do need to mention, though, that lately she has actually become a nervous wreck. The reason for that being because there's been too much trauma going on recently for me to protect her from, or for anybody else to protect her from. Who is the core personality? So this is actually a very interesting question. And we were regarding Angie for the longest time as being the core personality. We now know that that is actually not the case. Our system is set up very differently than most systems. There is the front. Basically, the front is, if you look at the store front, you can consider it that way. It's a storefront. It says what this body is. Behind that is where all the activity happens. Angie is actually the front. If you get to know Angie a little bit, you actually do realize she's not a complete person. She's not a complete personality. She does not interact well with people. She's not able to read emotions very well. She's not able to read body language very well. She has a lot of gaps in her memory. She's very forgetful. Sometimes she lacks common sense. This may be things that would be normal for a person to have all at once, but not to the degree that she does. She actually, if not for us being here, she would not be able to function normally as a person. She was the personality who was made to be a people pleaser. So when she comes out, or when she is out, I should say, she is not the core personality. Basically, she is the front. She is the normal one who goes out into the world and lets people believe that we're not here. How do people tell who is out? It actually depends on who's out. You can probably take a look at the first video that Angie had made and then this video here, and you'll see the differences between mannerisms, appearance, things of that nature, the way we talk. I tend to be a little bit more concise to the point. She tends to ramble. With Cassie, when one of the littles comes out, it tends to be very obvious. For example, Candace is nonverbal. She will not talk. She squeals. Cassie is very verbal and very friendly and will talk your ear off if you let her. So it kind of depends. It's one of those things that when you actually get to know us, you are able to notice the different personalities. there have been several times when Angie has said something out of character, and as soon as she does, people kind of look over and say, "Hello, Pixie," because they know that it's actually me who's saying it. The downside of this is that when Angie is in a relationship, and we are working on trying to make Angie a more complete personality, so when Angie is in a relationship, she does have relationship problems. And a lot of times if she's in the middle of arguing with somebody, they'll say, "Okay, who am I talking to right now?" And it really does annoy her because it's often her stating an opinion and them not agreeing with it, so they just assume that naturally it would be another one of her alters coming out and stating that opinion. So people can tell who's out basically just by getting to know us, watching the different mannerisms, noticing inflection, voice tone, things like that. My voice is deeper than hers, for example. So there's several different ways that you would actually be able to. Who makes the alters? This was actually a very interesting question, and I had to think about it for a while as far as how to answer it. Oh, we don't necessarily have a personality that's floating around up there just spinning alters out and putting them into existence. Um, Basically, the psyche, the actual personality of the person, when they are first born, a part of that does carry on throughout their lifetime. In our case, that part does not have a name, does not come out, is not a personality. But basically, that's how they're formed, is that psyche just keeps splitting and splitting and splitting. One of our alters, Pandora, actually split off into 3 separate personalities. She split off into Imp, Elfina, and Candace. So she did actually split her personality as well. Now, we do actually have a 9th, we would call it an entity, not really a personality, that we think might be the one who actually would be the one to create those personalities, or is the part of our mind who sees a need and then creates the personality to fill it. This is known as we generally call it the thread, a thread of consciousness, which kind of helps us know what's going on with each other. But as far as who makes the alters, it's kind of a hard question to answer. So what I will say though is that each personality can keep splitting off. I do feel that part of the core personality must have survived and just sees a need and tries to create a personality to fill it. So hopefully that sheds some light on that question. If not, then ask for clarification. How do relationships work? So this question was brought about by somebody who was actually potentially interested in us as a partner. He met me and went off running. Basically, the way that relationships work between us is we are called polyamorous. That means that we will be in relationships with more than one person at the same time. All of these people are aware of each other, so we're not cheating on anybody. Um, the reason for this is because whereas there might be somebody out there who will meet my needs, you wouldn't necessarily meet Angie's needs. So the way that relationships work, basically, if Angie is interested in a person, for example, could be man or a woman or trans or whatever. If Angie is interested in a person, then we'll have an internal conference. We'll talk about the pros and cons of that individual. We will also talk with the other personalities regardless of whether or not they want to be sexual with that person to see what their input on it is. If it is something that seems to be a good option or somebody who might be good for us, then we would actually continue to pursue that relationship. Those relationships, though, do need to understand that we are polyamorous, which means that we will have more than one relationship. The reason for this is not because they're not good enough or anything like that, it's just because we need it. And there have been times when I have caused breakups for Angie. One in particular was a gentleman who was actually driving me quite crazy because he was texting every 10 minutes asking Angie how she was. Um, and it was just really annoying. So finally, once I messaged him back, I said she's doing about the same as she was 10 minutes ago. And he didn't want to talk to us after that. So we have caused breakups for each other. Imp actually has been known to break up relationships because Imp is one of the personalities who carries the anger. So she's been known to actually break up relationships as well. So relationships work with lots of understanding, lots of sense of humor, and of course lots of communication between all parties. And one thing that we always do say when going into a relationship is don't take anything we say personally. It's not necessarily Angie who feels that way, it's not necessarily me who feels that way, and it could just be that somebody is having a bad day. So try not to take it personally. So this is actually a question that a few people have asked us. Does medical marijuana help? We don't know. We've never actually tried it. I will say that antidepressants tend to not help. Antidepressants cause issues that sort of backfire. For example, Angie was recently on Cymbalta. It helped me a great deal to feel a little bit more relaxed, not feel like I had to be in so much control. However, it also made one of our personalities tank. So it's a hard question to answer because we've never actually tried medical marijuana. The reason for that being we are concerned that the effects would backfire or that it would be great for some personalities but not for others. Are there flaws within the system? Yes, there are. If there weren't flaws, then it wouldn't be a mental disorder. The reason that there are flaws in this system is because you have to understand that this disorder takes place when you are a child. The mind of a child comes up with the solution to fix their issue, and that solution is normally flawed. So the core personality or the very beginning personality of the child that was born at some point saw that there was a need, created a personality to fulfill that need. So for example, the need for somebody to carry these bad memories so that that child was able to function, so on and so forth, somebody to carry the anger, the sadness, so on and so forth. So what have been the flaws within that system? Well, Angie, as mentioned, is the storefront. She is the one who most people see when they actually meet us. So the problem with that is that Angie does not feel hunger. Angie also does not feel tired. She doesn't have much of a sense of time frame for things. So you might say, well, there must be somebody in the head who deals with that sort of thing. there actually isn't. So looking at our body, you would see, the weight that we do weigh. We are considered overweight. So you may say, well, how is it that she doesn't eat, but she has all this weight on her? Well, that would be because there's a 3-year-old inside who loves sweets. I happen to be addicted to chocolate, and a lot of our personalities do not have the ability to say, okay, maybe I've had enough to eat now, we're good. Some of our personalities do not have the ability to realize that they are hungry, so she'll go 2 or 3 days without eating and then binge. So there are flaws within the system. Those flaws can sometimes be managed with therapy, it can be helped with therapy, but we have a feeling that there's always going to be flaws within the system. Basically what our therapist is working with us on right now is actually trying to just get us all to work together to be a cohesive system, and to know to do everyday things like eat, sleep, drink, etc. Were you always aware of your dissociative identity disorder? This is a question more for Angie, so give me just a moment. Um, so was I always aware of my dissociative identity disorder? That's kind of a hard question to answer. The reason for that being that I always knew something was different about me, but I never quite figured out what it was. In my first video, I had mentioned that I always had imaginary friends, but that those imaginary friends never acted the way other kids' imaginary friends did, if that makes any sense. So, like, mine would take over my body and talk to me, and um, other children didn't have that. My parents never knew about my imaginary friends. Um, I do know that when I was growing up, my mother used to say things like, "You just come back when you're my Angie again." So I think that she actually did see the change in my behavior, but she just thought it was me throwing a temper tantrum or something to that effect. Um, I I have asked people, if any of them had any inkling that this was something that was going on with me, and some of them have said, it wasn't really in your face obvious to the point that, oh gosh, I should have known, but there was definitely something there. And I do remember at one point I asked my dad, I said, did it ever feel, well, like when I was in the house with you, you were dealing with two people instead of just one person? And he would always say, two people. There was a lot more than that. So, I mean, it's kind of a hard question to answer. I think I've always known that there was something different about me. I just never realized what it was or to the extent that it was. And I started realizing that pretty recently just because I'm starting to notice how much it's affected my life, that this is a really harmful, um, a really harmful coping mechanism. And it's basically, right now, it's taken over my life. So, hopefully that answered all the questions that everybody had. That is all that I have here on the list. I wrote a list for Pixie to put this down and let her put makeup on and all that good stuff. So if there's any more questions, just feel free to post them in the comments below, drop me an email. Also, if you wanted to read my blog, a lot of the questions that are asked are actually on the blog, or the answers to it are on the blog. One thing I will say is that the amount of support that people have given us, just messaging us saying, hey, hang in there, it's really appreciated. So we appreciate everybody for viewing, commenting, liking, all that good stuff, and hope to see you again. Thanks, YouTube. Everybody have a great day.